person or online to another Way of Life podcast. It's awesome. We've got another one here tonight with our special guest, Letitia Shelton. I'll introduce her in a minute, but I just thought I'd let anyone know who's watching online or in person just a topic for tonight, just in case there's might be too young ears in your opinion. So we're actually going to be talking about the dangers of pornography and what we can kind of do to break free from that and support other people around that. So, and we're going to have some Q&A as well after the main talk. So if you want to ask any questions from Letitia, you can go to slido.com. It'll come up on the screen behind us throughout the podcast. And the code is 4130535. And that'll come up on the screen. We normally just go with the most voted questions, but if we find one that isn't actually appropriate, I won't be asking it, just so you guys know. But on to bigger and greater things. Letitia, so a little bit about Letitia. She can fill us in a little bit more. So she lives in Toowoomba. She is the founder of City Women and A City Free from Porn. She regularly speaks all around Australia and even overseas, as we've been talking just before the podcast. And she's the author of many, many books. So Letitia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, good to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I thought I'd dive straight into it. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what A City Free from Porn is.
Yes, it's a campaign that myself and the mayor of our city started about 5 years ago. And it really came out of about 15 years of me working with teenage girls.
Yeah.
And we realised a lot of these girls had suffered abuse, rape, incest.
Wow.
And we'll always continue to help them. But I became aware that porn was at the bottom of a lot of these issues, driving those issues in our nation. Yep. Actually, I remember one day sitting down and just reading the Australian newspaper and reading that the number one abuser in our nation was the brother. Because he was acting out what he'd seen on porn on family members generally. And so that really picked my brain because I love to help the vulnerable, but I want to get to the bottom of what causes a lot of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also in my city of Toowoomba, I sit on a domestic violence committee, and we want to see an end to domestic violence in Toowoomba, but the fact that 88% of pornography is violence against women is huge. So again, if we're going to address these issues, we've got to talk about what is fueling it, which no one wants to.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, let's make some noise in our city, and I was thankful that our mayor wanted to get alongside of me and be a voice as well. So City Free from Porn is really an awareness campaign.
Yep.
People might think that's a stupid name. You'll never be able to create a city free from porn. What are you going to do, ban it? And I wish I could, but I don't have those powers. But it's really to make the citizens of Toowoomba aware of the harm, and especially young people, because at the moment they think porn is really cool. It's the number one sex educator, and so I want to at least go to heaven knowing I've given them a choice. Yeah, and they know the harms. It's like the anti-smoking campaign. We know the harms of smoking, and so I want our city to know the harms of porn, and you still get to choose. We all get a choice what we watch. Yep. So it's really been about raising awareness of the harms of porn.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what does that kind of look like on a weekly basis, and I guess what kind of results have you seen so far?
Yeah, well, it's just one of the many things I do, so I kind of double with it on the side, actually looking to employ someone to help champion it.
Oh, that's awesome.
It looks like billboards in our city, so we crowd fund billboards that go up in the centre of town that just have different sayings and direct people to our website. Yep. It's looked like radio ads, television ads. Yep. Every year, myself and the mayor do a big rally outside Town Hall where we get local people to share their stories of the impact of porn. Yep. It looks like I've just finished doing a huge campaign this year to get 20,000 of these books, How to Talk to Your Kids About Porn.
Wow.
on the doorsteps of homes in our city.
That's so good.
So to empower parents to have the conversation. So it's just kind of every year I'm like, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
What direction? Just keep kicking dust up in the air and making a noise and having conversations.
That's so cool. And you just did a bike ride, I saw, to raise funds for that book, didn't you?
Yes, I rode from Darwin to Broome, which is around 2,500 kilometres.
That's a long way.
It's a long way, over 3 weeks. It got cut into 2 years because of COVID.
Fun.
But it was great to finish it, and we raised $120,000 to get 20,000 of those into homes, thanks to volunteers who just said, we want to deliver them into homes. Yeah.
It's good that the mayor's on board with that. I can imagine that would make life a lot easier with trying to do that.
Look, it's just great to, I think we've got to work with our politicians.
Yeah.
And it's great to have people with a profile willing to stand up. It's not a cool political choice to speak out against porn.
No.
And he's received his share of backlash, but then he's also said it's been amazing the number of women on council who have come into his office and thanked him.
Wow.
Behind closed doors because they're at home suffering with a partner who's addicted to porn. So, it works both ways.
Absolutely.
But we need more men in this battle.
Yeah. What can men do in that sense?
They can, well, if they're struggling, they probably need to get help first, which would be awesome. But also to be honest about their own struggles. And I've said to guys, I don't care if you're still struggling and you're willing to just get up and say, I'm still struggling, but it's hard and I need help. And this is the damage it's done to me. Yeah. So I think getting help, but then a male voice is really powerful because I think people tell me, well, every man watches porn. Well, they don't. I know a lot of men who don't. Yeah. And so to have men stand up and say, no, we don't, and this is not cool, and this is not how women should be treated or viewed is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the dangers of pornography? I've listened to other talks before and it's quite alarming. So I wondered if you could kind of go into how kind of the depths of how bad this is actually in our society and what kind of effect it's having. Yes,
there's just so much research out there, and not to mention stories, which are powerful. But one of the biggest ones is the fact that it rewires your brain. And again, I've talked to brain surgeons around the world who have talked about the impact that it does on the brain. Our brain is full of little wires and I guess trees that fire, and a healthy brain looks alive and firing, but a brain on porn is beginning to shrivel. It actually destroys your brain cells.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember speaking a few years ago at a school in Fiji where the principal said to me, I know our students are watching pornography because their grades are going down.
Wow.
So it affects your brain, which then makes you think, oh, she's an object, because, if you're going to start hitting and bashing somebody, you're going to usually view them as an object, not a human being to protect. Yeah. So it rewires the brain. It's addictive, very addictive, just like a drug. Cocaine, it does the same, has the same addiction on your brain in that way. It stops your ability to actually have a real relationship, to develop the empathy, to work hard. I mean, it's just a lot easier to watch porn than actually do the hard work on working through a relationship with a human being. And women can be complex and we can be hard work.
So can men.
Well, both ways, isn't it? But sometimes, if I can just get my sexual gratification from porn, it's a lot easier than having to work through it. There's huge statistics around erectile dysfunction, just everywhere, loneliness, depression, anxiety. So you name it, porn affects it, really.
Yeah. What... How young are some of these kind of people that watch it, and is because I know I've heard it a couple of times that we always kind of tend to focus on men because the vast majority of the statistics seems to be that it's men watching it, but I've heard that it's growing in females as well.
Absolutely. They say that 1 in 3 visitors to websites are now female. Wow. And since I've started this campaign, because I'm always talking about porn, a lot of young women, and especially young women in churches, actually a 64-year-old female grandmother shared her struggle today with it. So just when you think you can't hear anymore, you are.
Yeah, wow.
So it's certainly the porn industry. It's a $150 billion industry run by smart people who want to make a lot of money and ruin lives. And so they know they've got the males hooked.
Yeah.
So now they're going after the females. So it's an area that is impacting females. And again, the statistics around females who watch porn are more likely to be sexually abused because the porn has groomed them to believe that this is acceptable behaviour. Whereas the last man who tried to touch me, I kicked him so hard and said, don't you ever do that to me again, because I know that I'm valuable.
Absolutely.
And that's not how women are treated. But women who are watching porn go, oh, this is normal behaviour. Oh, if he wants to choke me during sex, okay. And that has a whole bunch of complications with it.
Absolutely. So how does someone get to that point of how does that process happen? Because I can't imagine it would be just like an overnight type thing where 1 minute you're not watching porn and then next and then you're completely changed. Yeah,
well, again, it's like a drug. And I actually heard Alan Meyer a few years ago do a session on how you go from just starting out watching porn to being a sex offender in prison. And it is a slow, gradual progression, but just like drugs, you can never stay at one level. You always need to keep going on harder and weirder and stronger stuff to get that hit. And so that's how you continue to go from here to next thing you're choking someone, which is really sick. And in fact, I don't know if you're aware, but last year Brisbane opened up a strangulation trauma centre.
What?
Yes, so this is where we're leading. And again, no one's going to go, oh, that's because of porn, because no one, they want to protect that area.
Absolutely.
Especially our politicians too. It's big money. They're probably involved in it, a lot of them. And so it's not cool to speak out about it.
So you're in a roundabout way saying it's actually not harmless, because a lot of people, particularly friends that I've had that maybe don't come from a Christian background, they've kind of gone, it's just kind of everyday talk. Like, of course I look at that. Like, of course it's harmless. Like, it's fine. But it does not seem to be the case. But I'm curious, why do you think people are so blind to it, of the effects of pornography?
It's a selfish, self-gratification culture that we live in, and maybe because it's dulling their brain cells, so they become blind. Look, and again, if I wasn't a Christian, you can't expect Christians to have the same foundation. I mean, non-Christians to have the same worldview as we do. And so they're growing up in a culture where it is everywhere. It's on Instagram, TikTok, it's in movies, music videos. So it's the normalised wallpaper of their life. And so, and because we're silent about it and no one is alarming them, and in fact, you have some schools or counsellors teaching them that it's okay, that porn can be empowering, that that there's nothing wrong with it. And so there's a whole range of reasons why we're blinded to it, but it's just become the normalised everyday thing.
It's so horrible. I actually can't wrap my head around it. So you're saying that it's probably more to do with money, really, at the end of the day, and kind of selfish desire, because how does one not see that kind of the root cause of some of this kind of violence that happens doesn't just come out of nowhere? I struggle to see how people can't see that. Look,
and you asked me before and I didn't answer, what are some of the wins we're seeing in our city? And I have seen some turn. As I've been able to educate, like last year I spoke, the head of our hospital got me to speak to her team, and I did a session on the link between porn and violence. And so those types of people, they could see it, but they just had no idea. No one had ever really brought the link. The police in our city, I've been meeting with policeman, the head of crime, and it took him 3 years before he was convinced that there was a link between porn and, again, the abuse. So, and with our politicians, I go and sit with them regularly because, again, they're not sitting behind their desks studying this stuff, so my job is to keep updating them. So there are, just good people who go, oh, my goodness, I had no idea. Because no one's telling them and no one's bringing the links. So, look, we are seeing people really, and I think because we've been able to get local people speak up. You know, I've heard a lot of guys in their 30s say, I wish someone had told me at 14 this was wrong.
Yeah.
I probably would have stopped, but no one did. There was silence. And so now to have people speaking up in our city saying this is not cool, it's planting good seeds.
Absolutely. Yeah, it seems like we live in quite a, I guess, sexualised culture. There's a lot of talk on sexuality and gender and that type of thing. So kind of pornography being fairly well accepted within that kind of frame of mind or ideology seems to make quite a lot of sense.
They're all linked. They're all in bed together. The abortion industry, everything, the sex industry, prostitution, they're all together because they all feed into each other.
Yeah.
And so the more porn you can get going, hopefully the more sex, then the more abortions and the more money, and then hopefully you're sending more people to the prostitutes, and it's one big vicious cycle.
Absolutely.
And all money driven.
It's really horrible. This is a bit of an obvious question, but I thought it'd be worth asking. Other than kind of the bad kind of implications of looking at porn, like why is it actually a problem? If someone was to ask you, like, why is it wrong, particularly from a Christian perspective, how would you answer that?
I would say at the core of the issue is the breaking down of the dignity of human beings. Not just for the woman who's, behind the camera, but for the man. He's breaking down his own dignity. And so I think as Christians, we believe that every human being has such dignity, such worth, such beauty. And so porn is just a direct violation of that in every single way. Not to mention then it breaks down your ability as a person to have healthy relationships, healthy marriages. And so, at the core of that, though, it's really human dignity to me on both sides.
How does it what does it look like when it's kind of breaking down your ability to love or be in a relationship? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, let me talk about, I've got a friend, I'll call her Jenny.
Yep.
But she's a real life person from my city. One day Jenny messaged me and said, because I post a lot on Facebook, and she said, can we have coffee? And I had known, I'd seen Jenny at a few different churches in my city and met her along the way, but we actually sat down for coffee, and she said, I need to tell you something. I used to be a porn star.
Yeah, right.
I was shocked. Jenny, okay. But I was also intrigued. I was like, please tell me your story.
Yeah.
And she said, she said, I grew up from a broken family, had no father, and I was abused as well. But all I ever wanted to do was be a nurse. And I finally graduated from school, got a job at our local hospital. And one day I was just walking down the corridor of the hospital, and a man stopped me and said, hey, you're a pretty woman. Would you like to come and do some modelling? And, of course, she found that very enticing. And so she went off and joined this company. And before you knew it, she said they were suddenly writing things into the contract. Clothes were needing to come off, this and that. You kind of arrive and they'd say, today you're doing this, and you couldn't really back out. And then before she knew it, she was over in LA, in Amsterdam, doing these shoots. And she just said the things that they asked you to do were so degrading, and that's what porn is.
Absolutely.
It's so degrading. And she said no one in her right mind can, shoot these porn scenes normally. So she had to start taking drugs, which created a full-blown drug addiction for her. Yeah. And then in order to get the drugs, she had to start stealing. She was stealing to get the drugs to do the porn shoots. Talk about breaking down your dignity and your value as a human being. And again, you think, well, why doesn't Jenny just get out of it and run away? But you don't always understand when you're stuck in this cycle and you've got these men over you and threatening things. And eventually she got caught, actually, and she now has a criminal record and can never go back to nursing. But she then spent the next 5 years of her life in rehab trying to get her life back together. So when people tell me, and this is an argument people tell me in my city, non-Christians, they'll say, me and my partner, we watch porn and it's empowering and I'm not out there raping anyone and it's not harming us. And I say, well, let me just tell you about my friend Jenny.
Yeah.
Because this is where it's landed her. And I get to speak to a lot of ex-porn stars because I speak at these conferences all over the world.
Yep.
And they're all got PTSD or got huge mental health issues.
Wow.
So just being in the industry alone, you know, so the ones who are in the industry are messed up, let alone the ones who are watching it.
Yeah.
So it's affecting everyone's lives at every
Absolutely.
different angle.
Yeah. Because I imagine what it would do watching it regularly, particularly if you're in a relationship, is that it kind of, like you were saying before, it kind of almost like objectify. And it's less about kind of love and commitment to each other, but more about how can you serve me in a way.
It's hugely selfish. And sorry, book plugs here. If anyone's zooming on these, this is a brilliant book that's just come out. I just finished reading it this weekend, called He Chose Porn Over Me. It's written by Melinda Tankard-Reist. She's Australia's premier speaker and researcher on this. And so it's really the stories of about 20 to 30 Australian women. So these are current day who were in relationships with porn-addicted men or married. And so there is no sense of beauty in their sex life. And so the addiction, I mean, it talks about, men trying to strangle their wives, the things they did to daughters or other family members. These are just your everyday
That's horrible.
people. And I highly recommend it for young adults because I've been working with teenage girls for 20 years and said, don't you ever go into a relationship with a porn-addicted person. And they think I'm nuts. But this book will scare you out of it.
Absolutely.
Or a porn-addicted woman. I mean, women get addicted to porn too. But it just takes the beauty out of what God created sex to be.
It seems to take the kind of the love God and love others out of it and just goes love yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
How do you help? Like, how would you help? I guess, here we go. How would you equip a church or, say, a youth group or particularly parents, I'd say? I think that's the best place to start. How would you equip parents to actually have these kind of conversations with kids? It's not the most fun conversation. That's why I was like, I really want to have this kind of conversation on the podcast, but it's a necessary one, but it can be a bit awkward. It can be confronting. So wondered if you kind of had any advice for us there.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I rode half across Australia to get this book. And so, look, there's great resources. There's a million websites out there, and you recommend it to people and they don't go to them. And that's why I thought I've got to get a book on their doors. But this book, How to Talk to Your Kids About Pornography, it just outlays what is pornography, how to have the conversations in age-appropriate ways. Because how does you speak to a 5-year-old is different to how you'll speak to a 15-year-old. But you still, if you're going to give your kid a device, you better have spoken to them that they're going to see naked, rude pictures and that they can come and tell mummy or daddy. Yeah. Because if they don't, they see this and then it sparks something in their body physiologically, but they know it's shameful, but they keep going back and forth to it. So to be able to say, you're going to see this, come and tell mum, you're not a bad person. Yeah. There's another great website, Protect Young Minds. It's brilliant, has all the resources out there. So there's so much. And I think for the sake of parents, you just can't be silent. I think if you can create an open family, and yes, it will be awkward maybe. But worth it. But the porn industry is talking to your kids whether you like it or not. And unfortunately, I find that Christian parents are a bit naive sometimes, thinking, well, my kids aren't watching porn. But porn is predatory. It wants your children. And I was in Washington, D.C. a few years ago speaking at a conference, and the speaker before me talked about the software that the porn industry uses to get in front of our children. And he said it's the same software that the American Army used to track down Osama bin Laden. So there's software that knows how to, which just boggles my mind. But again, it's a $150 billion industry. So huge money. And they're strategic, they're coordinated, they're on the front foot. I mean, we're looking at the moment, and I've been working with a group in America around Pornhub, the number one porn website in the world. And it looks like we're going to bring it down because we've found all these crime scenes on it,
Really?
which I will rejoice at. But I bet you in 2.5 seconds, something else is going to pop up.
I've often thought that if you can kind of take down the giant, particularly if it's anything to do with online.
Absolutely.
Usually something will
It will
replace it.
pop up again.
Yeah.
I mean, what I love is that we've put in a bunch of lawsuits and we're holding these evil people accountable.
Absolutely.
Which is really, and it's justice for all the victims who have found their rape videos being sold as porn on Pornhub.
Wow. That's tragic.
It is tragic. So, but yeah, it'll all pop up somewhere else. So
Yeah.
we've parents. Our government did a survey of Australian parents, and 77% of parents said it's their job to speak to kids about porn, but less than half do.
Wow.
And I think it's just a lack of being equipped. So get a hold of some of these resources.
Absolutely.
But then the church, please, the church has got, this is not divorced from our Christianity.
Yeah.
And we've got to speak into these issues.
Absolutely.
And there's plenty of great scripture verses out there.
Yeah.
We've got to lift the shame. And the reason why people aren't coming and getting help is because we don't talk about it and they don't feel like we're a safe place.
Yeah.
And so the church has got to speak up about it, and we'll keep working on society as well.
Yeah. As you go. Have you got any thoughts of doing other cities?
I'll tell you this story. And the first year that we began, we started with a big mayor's rally in the centre of town. And it was great. We just did an hour before work, and then people go off to work, but it all got filmed and put online, and I was doing media all over the world.
Yeah.
It was just, I think people thought we were a city free from porn.
Oh, right. And they were like,
and
whoa.
media was, reporting that we were, and anyway, it was hilarious. But anyway, we'd started and just gone everywhere, and I'm a pioneer, so I tend to start things and then just work out what we're doing along the way.
Yeah.
And I remember a few months after thinking, oh gosh, what have I done here? I've made a big scene and people are abusing me, and it's gone all over the world and whatever. But then I got an email from a lady in Paris. And she said, Letitia, we've seen what you're doing. We need to speak to you. And I said, oh, okay. I gave her my number. She kept calling in the middle of the night.
Classic European.
Eventually she calls at a time when I was awake, and she said, I'm calling on behalf of the President of France.
What?
I know. I was like, what? And she said, we've seen what you're doing in your city, and the President can see that porn is destroying our society. She said, will you come over and help us?
Oh, my goodness.
And I was... trying to pick myself up. I was, here I am trying to work out how to do Toowoomba, not knowing my next step. And I just say, yep, we'll work it out.
Wow, that's awesome.
She said, well, we've got elections next month, so I'll be in contact with you after that. And that president didn't get back in.
Oh, no.
But I felt like God say to me, you want a city free from porn? I want nations free.
Yeah, amen.
When you think that you've got a big vision, God's got an even bigger vision.
Yeah.
So look, we've been able to equip some cities, but I do a lot of work in Fiji, as I mentioned before, and we launched Fiji Free from Porn right before COVID.
Could you tell us a bit about that? That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'll go back a bit. I used to live in Fiji when I was 15. Our family moved there to work with the church, and my parents put me in an all-girls Fijian school, so I was the only white girl with 500 beautiful brown girls. It was good to be a minority. It's a prestigious school, so, a lot of chiefs' daughters and the president's daughters and everyone went there, and then little old white me. We were just there for a year, but it had a profound impact in my life. I came back to Australia. But then in 2019, some of my classmates were seeing what I was doing and said, can you come back to Fiji? Because we rate fourth highest in the world for Googling porn. And 2 out of 3 women are raped.
2 out of 3?
Yes. And so I said, sure, I'm coming. So 30 years on, some of my classmates are now in federal politics because it was a prestigious girls' school. They're lawyers, they're business people. So we've joined together to launch Fiji Free from Porn.
That's so cool.
The first ever speech in Parliament on pornography was made by my good friend who's in Parliament there.
Awesome.
And we've established a team. And just in May, I was back in Fiji for the whole month of May, our team joined together with the police band and a rugby team and marched around the whole main island. It only took 1 week, raising awareness around pornography. And this is a culture that is so silent. You don't talk about sex, even though they're all doing it.
Wow.
You don't talk about these issues. So, look, they're doing a great job. So maybe that's the nation.
That's so cool.
So
One nation at a time.
Look, we're not here to do what's possible. We're here to do the impossible. If we believe that God is the God of the impossible, I think our visions are too small.
That's good.
And I don't know how it's all going to happen, and I don't have the ability, but you just keep saying yes to God and moving forward, and it's amazing what he does.
Yep, absolutely. He's got it.
He's got it.
I want to kind of switch to a little bit of how would you kind of help people that are going through it? Yeah. And I think there's different stages in my mind. There's the person that actually hasn't told anyone. There's the person who kind of has and seeking help. And then there's people that can actually help those who do admit it. So how do you, if someone came up to you and kind of went, I'm really struggling, Letitia, with this, how can you kind of partner with them to help them?
Yes, and I wish there was a one-size-fits-all. I've learnt that you just can't put people, just go do that course and you'll be fine. Yeah. Some people have the ability to just kind of go, okay, I've confessed and I don't want it anymore and I've turned away. Others, it will be a 5-year journey and, struggling back and forth. And sometimes, if you've been deep in it, I wonder if, the residue of it, if you ever fully get free, you've just got to be we've all got to be on guard because it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so, look, and this is not my strength because I am more of an activist and a speaker, but we've worked hard at establishing in our city, we rang up a heap of counsellors and said, do you do counselling around porn addiction? And got their names, so we put them on our website.
That's great.
We've tried to work with churches to get them to run so there's different courses out there. Yeah. Most cities have a group called Sexaholic Anonymous, like Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, right. And so we've found them in our city. So I've just tried to find a whole range of different avenues and say, hey, these are the options. You're going to have to. Some people do really well in groups. Others just want to use a online course or something. Yeah. And it is different for everyone. Absolutely. I think if you're sitting here or listening to this and you are currently struggling, the first step is just to tell someone. Yeah. And it's amazing how the enemy wants us to think that we're the only one. But my good friend Melinda Tankard-Reist, who speaks in schools all over Australia, she says actually the Christian schools are the worst. Wow. Because of the shame. We know that we're not meant to. We're Christians. I shouldn't be in this. And so the shame factor is huge. But just going and telling someone, you'll be surprised how that someone will go, yep, I've struggled too. Yeah, wow. And I think the sooner we all admit that we've struggled somewhere along the way, the better off we'll all be. Yeah, absolutely. The sooner you can get better. Because I know there's like a few even like softwares that you can get for like phones and tablets and things like that. I think one was called Covenant. Yeah. I think I can't remember what the other one is. I started looking into it recently. Yeah. Fight the New Drug is just a brilliant organisation that comes out of America. Yeah. And if you go on their website, they have all the articles and the research and the resources available to men. I think they have some apps and different things and accountability groups that you can get involved in. So they are probably one of the premier main front people fighting this battle and doing it really well. Reaching millions of people all over the world. Yeah, I've read a bunch of their articles. They're scary but fascinating. Wondered if is there any way that we can kind of support you in this kind of journey that you're on with fighting this really, really big porn problem we have in our society? Yeah, the best way you can support me is by doing something in your own community or your wider community. Even though I'm a pastor in Toowoomba, I've always been taught that we're not here to pastor our own church, but our city. And Jeremiah
Like
29 tells us to seek the welfare of our city. And and that's why I just never wanted this to be about my church or a few churches in my city, and that would be easier. But once you go public and make it a city-wide issue, you open yourself up to a lot of criticism, but then a lot of great stuff as well. And so I think, the more that the church can kind of, and it might look different to you, but I think the church should be the ones speaking up in the face of evil and oppression. And
Absolutely.
One of my favourite quotes that drives me every day is by a German theologian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And he says, to be silent in the face of evil is more evil than the evil itself. And the church is we're so good at being silent around these cultural issues. But then also we should be declaring that that God has a far greater plan for sexuality.
Absolutely.
And that's, it's something beautiful. And in these boundaries, even though people might laugh at us, it's amazing. And so, for myself, I'm a single woman. I'm a virgin, and I do a lot of work with sex workers in our city. We're in and out of the brothels and strip clubs, and I let them know this is my journey, and they actually really admire me because they understand how their lifestyle has messed them up.
Absolutely.
And they can tell that I'm not a broken, bitter person because I've slept with every Tom, Dick and Harry, literally. So, our stories and living a different way, the early church turned the world upside down because they were different.
Absolutely.
And they offered something more exciting and better. And the fact that the world doesn't want to, they're not running in here. And so our job is to run out there.
We look kind of too similar, I reckon, at times to the world out there.
We're blending in, and we don't want the persecution. We don't want to stick our heads up, but we've got to. Otherwise, we're losing the battle.
Absolutely. I just had this last little thought before we go on to some questions. What would kind of be your message to someone who's feeling kind of incredible shame about this? Because I realise that's a big factor in this kind of cycle of continuing down this road, is that you kind of feel shame, you feel horrible, you obviously don't want to tell anyone, you're scared about what people will think, and then you kind of end up going back to it, and then it's like
look, it's very real. Shame, but I think it's a great tactic again from the enemy to keep us stuck and silent. And if I can just bring some scripture into this, one of my favourite scripture chapters is Matthew 1. It's actually really boring because it's 44 names, and it's usually one of those chapters you skip because you can't pronounce half the names. But in there are 5 women. You've got Rahab, who was a prostitute, Tamar, who disguised herself as a prostitute to sleep with her father-in-law to get pregnant. You've got Bathsheba, who was kind of essentially raped by David. You've got Ruth, her ancestry is a Moabite, and they came about through incest. And then you've got Mary, who her shame came about because, she was chosen as a teenager to carry the Son of God. So you've got these 5 women in the family tree of Jesus. That's what Matthew 1 is. It's the family tree of Jesus. These 5 women who all have shame. Jesus doesn't put them in Leviticus that no one reads. He brings these shameful women, sticks them right in the middle of his family, and he says, I'm not ashamed of them. I'm not ashamed of their mess. I'm going to redeem it. They're going to be a part of my family tree. And he redeems it and makes it something beautiful.
Absolutely.
And so as long as we live in our shame and hide behind it, there'll never be redemption. There'll never be beauty. And so it will be hard and uncomfortable at the first, but it's taking that first step to get help and to say, I need help. And hopefully whoever you're telling won't shame and condemn you, but will go, Jesus is always there in repentance.
Absolutely.
So if we can lift the shame, redemption and beauty can come in, and freedom.
Amen. It's good that we, as people that might get told one day, to not just try to condemn them, to actually listen to them, to love them. I think that's really important. So that's really good. Letitia, thank you so much. We're going to go to some Q&A in a minute here. So for those of you online or in person, if you want to put any questions in to Letitia, put it through online, and then in about 5 minutes we'll we'll come back together and we'll answer a few of those questions. And I think Letitia is going to be around just for a little bit at the stand if you want to buy a book or want to chat to her about this kind of stuff. She'd be more than happy to do that. And if you're watching online or at a future date, like, go check out her stuff, get behind her and get behind that organisation. So,
Yeah, can I just say for people
Absolutely.
online who want those resources, you can go to our citywomen.com.au website and we've got
Great.
an online shop there, so
yeah.
you don't miss out.